Have you ever felt like the world is at peace, but the news says otherwise? Like we're not technically in a world war, and yet everywhere you look, bombings, invasions, civil wars. It's like the whole planet is boiling just under the surface. What if I told you the way countries go to war has completely changed? I want to show you something. It's one of the most important graphs I've ever seen. It shows all the wars between countries, what experts call interstate wars, since World War II. And you'll notice something weird. The line is pretty flat. Some years, there are 1 or 2 wars. Some years, none at all. That can't be right, because if you pay attention to the world. So what's going on? That graph, it doesn't tell the whole story. Not even close. Because these days, wars aren't always fought directly between countries. The real battlefield is often inside a third country, and the world's most powerful nations, they're pulling strings from behind the scenes. This is the age of proxy wars. A proxy war is when one country supports a group or side in another country's conflict, not because they care about that country, but because it's a way to hurt their enemies without ever firing a shot themselves. Let me give you an example. Just imagine for a moment India and Pakistan. In the old days, if they didn't like each other, they'd go to war. Real war, bombs, soldiers, fights at borders. For example, World War I and World War II. But then something happened. We invented the most dangerous weapon in human history, the nuclear bomb. Suddenly, direct war between great powers became unthinkable. Because once nukes are on the table, everyone loses, even the winner. So big countries have stopped fighting each other directly. But they didn't stop competing. They just found a different way. Instead of battling head-to-head, they started finding smaller, weaker countries in crisis. Civil wars, revolutions, power struggles, and secretly backing one side. Money, weapons, training. Everything needed to win without ever showing their face. This is what we call a proxy war. And today, proxy wars are like ghosts. From the outside, it looks like a regular civil war, but underneath there's often a whole international web of support and influence. And that's what makes them so deadly, because in a normal war, when both sides run out of strength, the fighting ends. But in a proxy war, there's always someone behind the curtain, ready to send more guns, more money, more fuel to keep the fire burning. That's why modern wars drag on for years. Why peace feels impossible. Let's go back in time to the Cold War. 2 superpowers dominated the planet, the United States and the Soviet Union. They were obsessed with beating each other, but they couldn't fight directly, so they fought everywhere else. They backed opposite sides in wars across Asia, Africa, Latin America, the Middle East. China's civil war, Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Angola. Let's take Korea. North Korea was supported by the Soviets and China. South Korea had American troops on the ground. The result? A brutal war that destroyed the peninsula, even when North Korea wanted peace. Stalin told them to keep fighting, not to win, but to hurt America's image. That's the thing with proxy wars. Sometimes the people actually in the war aren't even in control. And yet, instead of learning from the horror of Korea and Vietnam, both sides doubled down. Proxy wars became official strategy. Fast forward a few decades. The Cold War ends. The Soviet Union collapses. You'd think proxy wars would stop too, right? Wrong. They exploded. Now there weren't just 2 patrons. There were many. Turkey, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Russia, the US. And in the modern age, you don't need tanks or fighter jets to support a side. A few crates of rifles, a bank transfer, some advisors, that's all it takes. Take the Congo. By the 1990s, it became a perfect example. Rebel groups fighting, neighboring countries backing different sides, all fighting for land and resources. Millions died. Let's move to Libya. A revolution in 2011. The country collapses. And instantly, the patrons arrive. France, Russia, Turkey, The UAE, the US, not to help, to control. Libya, still broken. Now Syria. It started as a peaceful uprising. It turned into one of the bloodiest wars of the century. Over 500,000 dead. Outside powers escalated it, year after year. Chemical weapons, extremist groups, endless suffering. Why? Because every time one side weakened, their patrons sent more help. Then there's Sudan, another tragedy unfolding, another proxy war, another country burning. You see the pattern? These wars don't end. They multiply, they escalate, and the people in the middle, they suffer most. But not all proxy wars are easy to define. Let's talk about Ukraine. Russia invades. The West supports Ukraine. Money, weapons, tanks. Is it a direct war or a proxy war? It's both. And that's what makes it so dangerous. Russia believes they're not just fighting Ukraine. They think they're fighting the West. And that belief is terrifying. Because when nuclear powers are involved, the stakes are sky high. But wait, where is China in all this? China doesn't do proxy wars. Not really. They prefer trade, diplomacy, stability. They say they don't interfere in other nations' affairs. And mostly, they stick to it. But what if that changes? What if China joins the game? If they start backing sides like Russia or the US, what happens to the world? Because the system is already stretched. Too many conflicts, too many hands involved. If China becomes another patron, can the world even handle that? So where does that leave us? We live in a world where war has changed. Now wars happen inside nations, but they're fueled by outsiders. That's why Syria lasted over a decade. Why Libya is still broken. Why Sudan is burning. Why Ukraine could spiral. These wars, they're not going away. They're getting easier to start and harder to stop. This is the new battlefield. This is the hidden war, and it's happening all around us. So the next time you hear about a civil war or a distant conflict, look deeper and ask yourself, who's really involved? Who's supplying the weapons? Who's paying the fighters? Because the answer might not be who you think. And in today's world, that could mean everything. Subscribe.